Hello, my name is Brian Howley. I'm Chairman of Balbriggan and District Historical Society. Today I'm going to tell you a few bits and pieces of the Balbriggan history. I'm going to make reference to this book, which is Balbriggan, A History for the Millennium, and it's published by ourselves in conjunction with Fingal County Council, republished in 1999. I suppose to talk a little bit about Balbriggan, where did the name come from? So the name that we use more these days, the Irish name of Balbriggan, is the town of the small hills. So there are a number of hills around Balbriggan. So to the north we have Breamore, which is Breamore, the high hill. That's where Breamore Castle is located now. To the west we have Clonard Hill, with Clonard. In Irish that means a high meadow, and that people will know that more where it is the Millfield Shopping Centre. High Street Hill here as well. So Balbriggan is definitely town of the small hills. So another theory about where the name comes from is the other Irish speaking Ballybracken. And brack small trout. And that comes from the Bracken stream, which is just located here running through the town. And then there was another theory about Ballybracken, B-H-R-E-C-A-N, who was a landlord, a personal name of Brecon. And that may be where it has come from as well. So Balbriggan, Balruddery and Balscadden, the three towns in the three areas in the general area. So Balbriggan is surrounded by Balruddery and Balscadden, but actually if you look at the first census of 1659, very interesting figures, Balbriggan was dwarfed by Balruddery and Balscadden. So Balbriggan had 30 people, Balruddery had 240 and Balscadden had 190. So Balbriggan, we're really talking about the 17th century when we had a small cluster of dwellings out around New Haven, and all those people depended heavily on fishing. Breamore Castle at the time was the home of the Barnwall family. They owned significant lands around the area and other areas. This is all in the 1650s or so. Balbriggan remained largely unchanged until the arrival of the Hamilton family. They commissioned the harbour around 1761 to 1765 was when that was built. And then it had further problems with silting, and a new pier was also built in 1826. Population running now at about 900. Breamore Castle, as I said, the home of the Barnwalls, very lucky that somebody called Austin Cooper, he was a traveller and writer, he visited in 1783 and he did an etching of a sketch of Breamore Castle, and some of that was used for the restoration of the castle. So in the late 17th century we already had two mills, the upper and the lower, and unfortunately, like a lot of industry down across the world, we would have to mention that there was significant child labour used at that time. Moving into the 1840s, we had the coming of the railway, the Dublin to Drogheda railway. There was a bit of a fight about where they wanted that to come. Other landowners wanted it to come in more towards Navan, but it ended up being Dublin to Drogheda. And with that, it brought boom time. So what it brought was the gasworks throughout the town, street lighting, only between October and March, salt works on the harbour, brickworks down near the Martello Tower and Clonard Hill, and also coal yards on the harbour and also here at Mill Street. There's a coal yard here. So I'm standing here at the monument to Sinead Ní Flanagan, so it would be remiss of me not to mention that she's a daughter of Balbriggan. She was born on the 3rd of June 1878. She became Sinead Ban de Valera as she married Eamon de Valera, Taoiseach and President. She wrote 31 books for children in English and Irish. So she was a teacher, a writer, a Gaeilgeoir. Another man to mention, Harry Reynolds. He was born in 1874, the Balbriggan Flyer. He was the first Irishman to win a world championship in cycling in Copenhagen in 1896. Part of his training he used to do was to race against the steam train travelling from Balbriggan to Skerries along the Skerries Road. So let's talk a little bit more about the industry in the 1800s. So we're into 1775. Hatton and Smith were set up They were working textiles, but largely on a cottage industry basis. And that firm then became Smith & Co. in 1780. In 1805, a man by the name of Mangan started work in Smith & Co. and sometime later took on his new son Thomas, an apprentice. And this is where he started doing this perfect lace and open work. They were making stockings, silk stockings, ladies' silk stockings. And really they set the standard for the world. They went on to have customers including the Empress of Austria, Princess Eugenie, the Tsarina, and Queen Victoria. So as I said, all these royalty, Queen Victoria, etc., insisted on the top quality tradespeople to make their clothes. And then at one stage she insisted on Balbriggans only, those fine silk stockings. And Thomas Mangan was the top quality man, and I'm using the word top here a lot because there's a famous Balbriggan phrase, "you're a topper." And that actually, usually used with children and so forth, saying, "you're a topper." But that actually refers to the work on the lace stockings. The stocking, the main part of the stocking anyone can make, but to make the very delicate, very top quality, top piece of the stocking, you needed to be the right man to do that. And Thomas Mangan was that right man. These stockings were all very, very light. A dozen weighed 3.5 ounces. Imagine that. And it won royal approval. And Thomas Mangan ended up making these stockings for Queen Victoria for over 65 years. And he was rewarded for his dedicated service on the 25th of September 1983 in the courthouse in Balbriggan. The recorder of the court presented him with what the equivalent is a signed autographed photograph of Queen Victoria. So I think the phrase in the paper mentioned her image hand signed by the lady herself. That was in the Daily Press, it was reported. And the word Balbriggan made its way, because of the fine silk stockings, made its way into the Oxford English Dictionary. Look it up and you'll see it's a fine silk stocking. Many others, of course, copied it, and there were rivals. There were English Balbriggans. But Smyco entered numerous amounts of exhibitions and won various competitions all over the world. Vienna, Dublin, Philadelphia. And the medallions, as when all the people get off the train, when they come home from Dublin, and they look onto the eastward facing wall of the Smyco factory, they'll see those plaques, and they refer to all those excellent competitions that they won. In 1897, Smyco built a second factory and built an enclosed footbridge across the top. And that made it a very unique and distinct factory. And indeed, the famous artist L.S. Lowry came here in 1970 and with a felt tip pen sketched an image, and that ended up being sold for a considerable amount of money. But I'm happy to report a number of years ago it was a Balbriggan local that bought it, and that remains in Balbriggan town. Around this time as well, Thomas Ogle and William Suttle, Preston and Leeds they were from respectively, and they came in and set up another firm in around 1806, but in 1883 that became Gallon's Mills, and that's another famous part of Balbriggan hosiery history. I'm down here by the harbour, so it'll be important that I mention the lighthouse. So the harbour was built between 1761 and 1765. The lighthouse came in 1769 and it had an original dome, a glass and brass dome, and it was beautiful. And sometime later, around 1860, the Rockabill Lighthouse was built, and that took over the main, I think Balbriggan was then called a minor harbour light. The removal caused a lot of local consternation, and I know that the society, the Historical Society, and a number of other local groups, and a man called Martin Fanning in particular, got involved with the Fingal County Council and had a campaign and got the dome put back. I think it started in 2017, and 2018 then the dome was replaced. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the sack of Balbriggan. Tragic events happened in September the 20th, 1920, leaving an unforgettable imprint on the memory of the people of Balbriggan. Earlier that day, Peter Burke, Head Constable RIC, accompanied by his brother William, a sergeant, entered Smith's pub in Balbriggan, that's now the Millrace pub, for a drink. There are confusing accounts of what happened there, but shortly after that, Peter Burke was shot dead and his brother was seriously wounded. Word reached Gormanston Camp, where the Black and Tans were stationed, and subsequently a large body of these men arrived into the town in lorries, firing shots indiscriminately. The Burkes were based at Gormanston Camp as well with the Black and Tans. These lorry loads of the Black and Tans arrived in. They stationed outside the barracks on Bridge Street, which is now Ashling Dry Cleaners. They looted the premises of John Derham, a local town commissioner. This building is now the medical centre on the corner of Bridge Street and Clonard Street. The Black and Tans burnt several other businesses, premises and houses, including 8 cottages on Clonard Street, known locally at the time as Sinn Féin Alley. And this resulted in many families rendered homeless and many more sleeping outdoors in fear for their lives. So several licensed premises were also destroyed, including Landy's and the Gladstone Inn. They're now the Harvest and the Milestone Inn. And the Black and Tans were determined to wreak havoc on the townspeople and intended to destroy the premises of Smith & Co. But they burned another factory, the Balbriggan Sea Mills, which was owned by Deeds Templar & Co., ironically an English company. And all that remains of that is the factory chimney. You may be able to see that in the distance there. In addition to burning and the destruction of the town, several local people were dragged into the RIC barracks for questioning. It was outside here that 2 young local men, Seamus Lawless, a barber, and Sean Gibbons, a dairy farmer, were murdered whilst being questioned. A commemorative plaque can be seen on Bridge Street, dedicated to their memory. Both men were buried in Balscadden Cemetery, and Constable Peter Burke was buried in his native Glenamaddy, County Galway. Fulham Terrace was named in honour of the bravery of Dr. Fulham on that fateful night, as he helped all of the afflicted, whilst Lawless and Gibbons Terraces were also named in honour of the 2 men. So obviously 100 years is a huge milestone, a huge commemoration. Very, very important to the people of Balbriggan, and also very important nationally. We had a number of planned events arranged for September the 20th, and please watch balbrigganhistory.com website, and we'll update you on those plans as we move forward.